All right, this video is going to cover the Middle Ages. I'm going to go over the Middle Ages study guide that we did in class today, preparing for our test tomorrow, which is January 23rd of 2014, over the Middle Ages. So if we take a look here, I basically have the study guide that we did in class, and I'm going to go through the correct answers so you know what to be studying for tomorrow. The first part of the test is going to be a matching vocabulary section. And so we have the following words, and these are basically the definitions that you should be thinking about. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, swept through Europe from 1347 to 1351, killing somewhere between one-third and two-thirds of Europe's population. We don't know for sure because record keeping wasn't very good back then, but this disease spread rapidly and really it killed about somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million people over a 5-year period. Feudalism, a system of exchanging land for military service. Clergy are people who worked for the church. People like priests, nuns, monks, the Pope, cardinals, bishops. People that devote their life to work for the church are called clergy. Christianity was the most common religion of the Middle Ages. It was a religion that followed the teachings of Jesus. A manor was a large estate owned by a noble or knight, and in many ways it was like a small village. It was the land that the noble or knight was giving within that process of feudalism, where they promised to fight for a king that gave them the land. So that was that piece of land that they got, the manor. A serf was a poor person who owed a debt to a noble and could not leave the manor. So on the manor you had peasants and serfs that were the people that actually worked in the fields, did the hard labor. And the big difference between a peasant and a serf was that a peasant could come and go as they pleased, but a serf was tied to the land because of a debt. A crusade, or the Crusades, were the holy wars that the Christians of Europe waged against the Muslims over the control of the Holy Land, the city of Jerusalem in particular. Magna Carta was one of the first documents to try to protect the rights of the people, or another way to think of it is it tried to limit the power of the king. The Middle Ages is a time period in Europe between 500 AD and 1500 AD, so between the fall of the Roman Empire and the start of what we refer to as modern times. 1500 AD, that's right around the time that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. And a noble is a person born to a powerful, wealthy family. So that's our vocab, and that'll be a matching section. Then we move to 4 big questions that we have for you. And the way this will work tomorrow is you'll be presented with all 4 of these questions. You'll pick 2 of them that you feel very confident, that you feel you know the most about, and you'll write and tell us what you know about those 2, okay? So of these 4, you only have to focus on 2 of them tomorrow. So as you look through this and listen, you may decide, well, these are the 2 I feel like I know the most about, and that's what I'm going to have my focus on. The first one, describe the history and importance of the Black Death. So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Black Death was a disease that swept through Europe between 1347 and 1351. Let me make this just a little bit bigger. It might be easier for you guys to see. Go up to 200. There we go. A widespread disease. It spread through Europe, killing 1/3 to 2/3 of the population. It's also known as the bubonic plague. It began in China and was brought to Europe by traders. The disease itself was carried by fleas, those little insects that live on rats. The flea would bite the infected, sick rat, jump onto a person, and when it bit that person, it would transmit the disease. It killed people usually within about a week of getting it. After the Black Death swept through Europe and killed, unfortunately, all of those people, life got better for the survivors as there was more food, more jobs, and better pay. So you want to be able to talk about all of those things, how the disease started, how it was spread. We talked about the fact that once people got it, if they were going to pass away, it usually happened within about a week. The symptoms were very much like the flu, but unfortunately people didn't get any better when they got it. Second question, explain the role of the Christian church during the Middle Ages. The church tied the people of Europe together after the fall of the Roman Empire. It gained political power as cardinals, bishops, and popes helped the kings rule. The kings of Europe normally had one of those men of the church at their side, helping them decide who to go to war with and who to have alliances with. The church influenced the art of the Middle Ages by paying artists to paint and sculpt scenes from the Bible. Artists have to make money somehow, and the church was probably the biggest purchaser of art in the Middle Ages. So much of the art that survived from the Middle Ages that we see in museums today has a religious theme to it. The church was also the center of daily life for many people. It is where the church, especially on every manor, when we talked about the feudal system and the manor that the nobles lived on, that manor was like a little village in and of itself, and every manor had its own church. And that's where people got married, celebrated holidays, baptized their babies, had their funerals. It was very important to the life of people in the Middle Ages. The church also kept records of these events for the people. We've talked before how during the Middle Ages, most people couldn't read and write. Some of the few people that were educated were the clergy, the people that worked for the church. So in most villages or on most manors, it was one of the priest's responsibility to keep records of when babies were born, when babies were baptized, when people got married. They kept books of all of this information. When people passed away, they kept books of that too. Next question. Explain the importance and structure of the feudal system and the manor. The feudal system was a system of exchanging military service for land. A king would divide his kingdom and give pieces of it to nobles who would then promise to fight for him. The land the nobles lived on was called a manor. The manor itself was like a small village containing a large house for the noble, a church, a blacksmith where the blacksmith would make any metal goods. He'd make weapons, armor, tools that would be used on the farms. There'd be a mill where they would bring the wheat that they grew to grind down into flour to bake bread to eat. There was farmland that the serfs and the peasants would work on to grow the food that everybody that lived in the manor would eat. There were small huts for the peasants and serfs to live in. And pretty much during this time of the Middle Ages, people lived their entire lives on the manor that they were born on. There was no reason to go anywhere else. You grew your own food, you made your own clothing. People didn't have very many material possessions back in those times, so everything they needed was right there on the manor. So again, that important piece is that the feudal system itself is the way that kings got the nobles and knights to be loyal to them was by giving them land to live on. And back in those times, if you had land, that made you a rich person. The final question that you can answer tomorrow, explain the importance and impact of the Magna Carta. Magna Carta was the first document to try to protect the rights of people. The nobles of England wrote it and forced King John to agree to it. Magna Carta had 63 demands that the noble had for the king. Things like not being able to raise taxes without their agreement, not being able to take someone's property, and the need for evidence when accusing a person of a crime. So this document, the Magna Carta, became one of the first attempts to try to control the power of a king or get a king to share his power with the nobility. And in turn, that hopefully protected the rights of the people. Magna Carta is important to us today because the founding fathers of our country looked at it and used it to help to create the United States Constitution, to help decide what types of laws we should have and how we should limit the government and the power that the government has. Okay, that's it. Again, vocabulary for the first part, matching vocabulary for the first part of the test, and then of the 4 questions that I just went through and discussed, you'll need to be able to write, without looking at your notes, on 2 of them. You need to, let's say you decide that you really think you understand the feudal system really well, so you may choose to answer that. And you would want to make sure that you explained who was involved in the feudal system, kings, nobles, and knights. That you'd want to explain that it was an exchange of military service for land. And then you would explain what life was like on a manor, that the noble would have his home there and all the pieces that went into the manor that I discussed before. So let's make sure that we study this evening so that we're ready to take this test tomorrow over the Middle Ages and do the best we possibly can.